everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you so much for being here and participating. My name is Yazmin Hernandez. I'm a program coordinator for Youth to Leaders Education Foundation. Today we have a really special guest, and thank you so much for being here, Yazmin Hernandez. She's a accredited representative for UFWF here in Bakersfield. And so she's going to talk to us today a little bit about DACA, any updates that people should know about, and any eligibility requirements that first-time applicants should be aware of, especially if they're thinking of applying.
So like Yazmin Reyes just stated, my name is Yazmin Hernandez, and I am a current employee with the UFW Foundation. I am what's called an accredited rep that is allowed to give immigration advice to those who are perhaps looking for some sort of immigration remedy. So today's topic is going to be about initial DACA. Before I get started on that, before I begin my presentation, I do want to simply go over, what's been happening during the past weeks. As we all know, on June 18th last month, the Supreme Court ruled that it was unlawful to terminate DACA based on the argument that our current president's administration filed with the court. As we all know, that failed, which means that USCIS should start accepting initial applications. However, at the moment, USCIS has not announced a specific date of when they'll start to accept those applications. So what our foundation is doing so far is that we are screening potential applicants who are interested in applying for initial DACA for the first time. We are providing a list of required information along with examples of evidence that they have to obtain in order to apply for initial DACA. And we are offering, an appointment to revise all of the documents that that person has obtained in order to prepare them for when USCIS announces that they are accepting new initial DACA applications. Once again, unfortunately, the Trump administration did announce also that they were going to refile paperwork with the Supreme Court. So far, they haven't made that announcement just yet, but it is speculated, right, that it can happen sometime this month. So we are also cautiously monitoring that for any changes in a potential refile with the court again by the Trump administration. So let me go ahead and just start sharing my screen. Let's see if I can get this. Okay, so, whoa, it skipped all the way down over there. Okay, so once again, DACA is a temporary benefit that was passed during the Obama administration. As we all know, it was implemented on June 15 of 2012. And what this did is it essentially provided those who were eligible for DACA with a temporary legal status, which protects them against deportation. And it also provides applicants who are eligible with a work permit that is, viable for 2 years. A benefit, of having DACA is a simple fact that if you are ever detained by ICE, you do have that protection against deportation. And our Department of Homeland Security has emphasized in the past that for DACA recipients, they don't consider them high priority for removal. So people who have DACA are low priority for ICE. Other benefits that come with obtaining DACA is that applicants are provided once again with work authorization through a work permit that is valid for 2 years. They are also provided with a social security number, which they can use permanently. And they are also provided with the opportunity to apply for a driver's license, at least here in the state of California. As we all know, DACA recipients are eligible to apply for in-state California scholarships or in tuition opportunities, either through Pell Grants, Cal Grants, stuff like that. So if you are a DACA recipient, you are eligible to apply for college assistance here in California. Another benefit that came with is that once again, people who have DACA can apply for scholarships and for loans. In the past, people who didn't have DACA and who are undocumented, unfortunately cannot apply for a loan for the simple fact that they don't have that social and they don't have that quote unquote legal identification to prove that they have legal status. For many people, this can become a barrier to continuing their education, and attending college. But there are resources out there that are available for people who are undocumented, have DACA or some other legal status. And I can go ahead and share a link from Immigrants Rising. that, they have a full list of scholarship opportunities that graduate students, undergraduate students can apply for if they have DACA, are undocumented, or have some other form of temporary legal status. And another benefit that DACA also comes with is that people who have DACA are eligible to apply for full scope Medi-Cal here in California. So once again, I do want to clarify, that DACA is not the DREAM Act, right? It does not provide people with the full path to permanent resident status, nor a path to citizenship. This is only providing people with some sort of temporary legal status that protects them against deportation if ever confronted, with ICE. It also provides people with a work authorization document that allows them to be, quote unquote, lawfully employed. So before going into all of the requirements that are needed for initial DACA, I am going to discuss each one individually. I'm going to go ahead and provide an explanation of what type of evidence you can obtain in order to prove that you are eligible for initial DACA. One of those requirements is that the applicant must have entered the United States prior to turning age 16. So what this means is essentially that the person must have entered the United States when they were 15 years of age or younger, and they must have entered the country before June 15 of 2007. Another requirement is that the person must have been born after June 15 of 1981. What this essentially refers to is that the person must have been at least less than 31 years of age when applying for DACA. Another requirement is that the person must have lived here in the United States for a continuous period during the last 14 years since June 15 of 2007. As I will discuss later on, this is probably one of the sections that most people have issues with, because they have to prove that they have had, that they have been living here in the United States with either medical documents, school records, financial records, other documentation that proves that they were in fact here in the US and that they did not depart the country during this time period. And I'm going to go ahead and delve into this topic a little bit more down the road, but for now, I'm just going to give that general information. Another requirement for initial DACA is that the person must prove that they were physically present here in the United States on June 15 of 2012. For many people, this can also be a barrier by the simple fact that, during the month of June, most students are off on vacation, and we have seen it in the past where perhaps they lack documentation to prove their physical presence here on this date. But some suggestions that can be provided to applicants who are interested is that if they have documentation that proves that they were here like a month before and a month prior, plus letters of support proving that they were here on that specific date, that type of documentation can actually work for this particular requirement. Okay, let me just move this forward. Okay, another requirement is one of the main principal requirements that for some people sometimes also proves to be an issue, but the applicant must have graduated high school. In other terms, they must have their high school diploma. If they did not attend high school but have obtained their GED, that would also work as well. For those applicants who are still enrolled in high school, that would suffice, that would still help make them eligible to apply for DACA. That they would just simply have to obtain, documentation to prove that they are enrolled in high school at the moment. If none of the above pertain to you, that's still fine. Another requirement that you can use, to meet this particular element is that you must have been honorably discharged from the U.S. Armed Forces. In other words, are you a veteran of the military? So once again, high school graduate, GED, currently enrolled in school, or are a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces. And like how I mentioned in the past, you must prove that you have been here in the United States, since June 15 of 2007. We have ran into, cases in the past where perhaps applicants, departed the country, let's assume that on 2009 for some sort of family emergency. If that's the case, it would depend on a case-by-case basis, but if your departure from the country was simply for a brief and innocent reason, we can make the argument that that departure was only brief and innocent, and hopefully argue for your DACA eligibility. Another main component for initial DACA is that you cannot submit the application if you turned age 31 before June 15 of 2012, and you must be at least 15 years of age when you are applying for DACA. There are certain exceptions for those people who perhaps have some sort of immigration court date because perhaps they were detained by ICE. You know, if you are in deportation proceedings, there is an exception to this. Okay, I'm not going to focus too much on the travel guidelines. This is more for, you know, for a legal rep or an attorney to revise. But once again, if you departed the United States for some reason, and if that departure was simply brief, innocent, or casual, you can still go ahead and continue, you know, with an application for initial DACA. If, for instance, assuming that you left the United States for a year or more and your departure was not innocent or casual, then that may actually impact your eligibility for DACA, but it's very important to first get a consultation first so we can analyze the reason for that departure. Okay, so unfortunately, like with any other immigration benefit, there are disqualifications that prevent someone from applying for initial DACA. For instance, if a person has been convicted for a felony or a significant misdemeanor or 3 or more misdemeanors, this person is unfortunately, you know, not eligible for DACA. There is, you know, certain exceptions to certain convictions, but it would just vary on a case-by-case basis. For instance, if a person receives a DUI, if they've received it during the application process or prior to the application process, we would have to analyze that conviction for that DUI and see if perhaps, you know, there is some sort of remedy to help that person apply for DACA. Okay, I'm not going to go too much into detail into the legal definition of a felony or a significant misdemeanor, but I do want to emphasize that you know, a conviction for domestic violence will always make someone ineligible for DACA. Minor traffic offenses will not automatically disqualify someone from applying for initial DACA. Nonetheless, it is still very important to disclose these traffic offenses to an attorney or a rep where you are seeking a consultation with. When it comes to, you know, expunged or juvenile convictions, there are cases where perhaps an applicant may have been arrested, you know, as a juvenile. You know, despite this occurring when they were underage, it would still have to be disclosed during the application. It's not an automatic disqualification factor for initial DACA. However, it still has to be reviewed because this will vary on a case-by-case basis. One most important factor to highlight is that if you were convicted as a juvenile, right, but you were convicted as an adult, you will be treated as an adult for immigration purposes when it comes to your consideration for initial DACA. One most important thing also to discuss is that the initial applicant has the burden of proof when you're applying for DACA. So, you know, in technical terms, what that essentially means is that you have to prove to USCIS that you are eligible for DACA by meeting all of their requirements. So once again, you must have been here in the United States since at least June 15 of 2007 to the present time. You must have entered into the U.S. before you turned age 16. You must have been here in the U.S. on June 15 of 2012. You must prove that you are eligible for DACA by providing evidence to your age and your identity, and that you meet all of their other educational requirements. Now going into the documentation to prove that you are eligible for DACA, you have to provide, you know, proof of your identity. This can be done either through some sort of government document, such as a passport or a California driver's license or an ID. If you don't have either of the above, you know, that's still fine. What you can still provide is a birth certificate along with your school ID, either it being your high school ID or if you have a college ID, that would work as well. Suggestions for proof of having entered the United States before age of 16 can vary. It just depends really what you have accessible to you, you know, documents that you perhaps know that you should have, which can vary from immunization records, school records, work documents, any other form of immigration documents that have your name and the date. When it comes to proof of education, Obviously, the most important documents can either be your high school diploma, your school transcripts, your GED certificate, or any other form of documents that establish that you are a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces. So once again, the other element that you would have to prove, right, is that you were here in the United States on June 15 of 2012. This can be proved either through bank statements, once again, school documents, bills such as, let's say, phone bills, any other household bills that you have for that day, you can still use that, or any other invoices that have your name and the date. For instance, if you were already leasing an apartment or a home, receipts of rent and other expenses containing the month of June of 2012 would also work. Okay, so this is the technical part and probably the part that most people may struggle with. But you do have to submit documents that establish that you have been here in the United States since at least June 15 of 2007 to the present time. One important thing about documents for this is that every document that is submitted to USCIS must have the applicant's name and the date. For instance, in the past, what we have seen people submit has been taxes, right? If we're assuming that you're like under the age of 18, or if your parents still claim you as a dependent on their taxes, you can still use your parents' taxes, to prove your presence during that time. If you had any form of insurance, bank statements, car titles, credit cards, any form of loans, those documents would work. For if you have medical records, they can be doctor visit records, immunization records, medical bills, or any other, medical bill that you have from a doctor visit, a checkup, etc. Prescription documents, x-rays, dental history, essentially any form of documentation that you can gather and find that has your name and the date of that particular event. Sometimes, we should get creative on obtaining evidence. Sometimes in the past, what people have submitted, for instance, let's assume that an invitation for a quinceañera. If you were a chambelán, or if you were part of that quinceañera's, inner circle of chambelanes, etc. If that invitation has your name on it, along with the date and the location of that particular event, we can go ahead and use that to prove that you were here on that particular date. If, for instance, you've traveled with your family, throughout those years, and you have gone to visit, let's assume that Yosemite, and you guys took a picture in front of the Yosemite sign, we can use that picture as long as it has the date on it, and as long as there is some sort of visual that proves that that location was here in the US. Once again, you can also use letters or affidavits from friends and family members to prove your presence during that time. However, letters alone are not always going to be sufficient. So what this means is that you can submit letters along with other forms of evidence to prove your presence during that time. So once again, if you have pictures of your presence here in the US, you can submit pictures along with letters from either relatives, friends, teachers, professors, etc. And one important thing to note is that unfortunately USCIS will not accept letters from relatives or friends to prove that you entered before the age of 16. So when it comes to proving your entry before that age, you do have to submit concrete evidence that can validate your entry before you turn the age of 16. And once again, that can be done through immunization records or school records. Okay. So like I said before, if you don't have any proof of your presence here in the US, you can always submit circumstantial evidence, right? Like if it's taxes through your parents, other documentation that can help your case, definitely give it a try. But first, make sure to get that revised by someone who has knowledge of immigration laws, either through an attorney or an accredited rep. Okay. Other information that will be required for an initial DACA application is, the date that you entered into the United States, along with your manner of entry, which for some, the majority of the time it can be no legal status. Your place of entry, for instance, through which area did you cross through to get into the country? Was it San Isidro? Was it El Paso, Texas? Whatever that information is, it's very important to obtain it. If that information is not yet known, it's very important to talk to your parents or other relatives that perhaps have knowledge of that information in order for you to have it when you complete the application. Another important factor that will be needed is all of the addresses that you have lived at since you first entered the US. Okay. And for those that perhaps may not be eligible for DACA, despite being unable to apply for initial DACA, it's also important to get screened and get a consultation to see if perhaps you qualify for another immigration remedy. Sometimes some people may not be eligible to apply for initial DACA, but perhaps they have some other form of immigration remedy through a family petition or another form of immigration case. Okay. So a common question that people have when they try to apply for initial DACA is the fear of being denied. So for immigration, they unfortunately will not accept any appeals. So if your initial DACA application is denied, unfortunately, you can't appeal it, but you can try and resubmit it if you get new additional evidence that perhaps was not submitted the first time. In the past, USCIS has stated that, that they are not going to share DACA applicants' information with ICE. However, throughout the years, and especially throughout this year, it has been noted that USCIS, has provided information with ICE of DACA applicants. So there is always that, small chance that, that ICE may have access to your immigration records because of the information that you submitted for your initial DACA application. And once again, it's very important to be extremely honest with whoever will be assisting you with initial DACA for the simple fact, right, that you are submitting information to USCIS, which is an immigration agency. And we want to make sure that you are at no risk whatsoever in submitting your information to them. So if you ever have been arrested or detained, it's very important to speak to an attorney or an accredited rep before applying for initial DACA and essentially before applying for any immigration remedy. At the moment, USCIS does have a fee for initial DACA as well as DACA renewals. The current fee for USCIS is a total of $495. $85 of that $495 stems from biometrics, which is essentially just your fingerprints for that particular appointment, and the $410 is essentially just the application for your work permit. The application to apply for DACA itself, which is Form IA-21D, has no fee at all. In the past, this has also been a common question. We do understand that with COVID-19, some people, may not be economically, in a good position. So there has been the question of whether or not there is a fee waiver available. So unfortunately, there is no fee waiver that is available to DACA applicants. However, if, for instance, the applicant, is in a dire financial situation where they cannot pay for that $495 DACA fee, there is a possibility of submitting a documentation to prove that they are not financially capable of applying for that DACA, of paying for that DACA fee of $495. But that would be only in limited cases where the applicant really has no other means of paying for the $495 fee to USCIS. Evidence to submit when proving that can be, for instance, medical debt, any other form of financial debt, and prove that they are not employed. We can go ahead and submit that to see if USCIS, can grant the fee waiver. Okay, and it looks like this will be it for my presentation on DACA. It looks like, Elizabeth, we still have Elizabeth. I'm not sure if she had a question or if that was just a comment. I can't really see.
Let me check. No, we don't have any questions. For those that are here, if you do have any lingering questions, please be sure to use the chat box or the Q&A to ask while we have Yazmin here. And I do have a question, Yazmin, while I have you on here. So I know you mentioned that USCIS hasn't released any instructions as far as like filing the first time DACA application. Do you have an idea when we should be expecting any updates or anything like that?
Unfortunately, at the moment, there is no a specific guidance in terms of when they'll make that announcement. Like I said, the Trump administration is getting ready to refile another lawsuit with the court. So it's very hard to tell or even to give like a time frame of when they'll make that announcements. But so far, it's just, it's being up to date to see if they make an announcement at any time. I know that, when they commented on the Supreme Court's ruling, it wasn't really a favorable comment to our DACA recipients, right? So needless to say, they may or may not make an announcement. It's very unsure at the moment. It's just a matter of keeping ourselves up to date with anything that they announce.
And then I know when you were talking about all this different types of evidence and proof that applicants need, is there such thing as too much evidence or too little, or is it just a matter of whatever the individual has?
Right. So if for some reason an applicant doesn't have proof to establish that they were here continuously, unfortunately they would have to have the required documentation and evidence for an application, right? So like I discussed, one of the requirements is to prove that that person has been here since June 15 of 2007 to the present time. If for some reason, right, we're assuming that this person is missing like 5 months, right, 5 months back to back, unfortunately this person is going to have to gather evidence for those 5 months in order to prove that they have been here in the United States. When I was discussing that time frame from June of 07 to the present time, what we tell clients is that they can obtain evidence for every 3 months, which means that there can be a 2-month gap in between those months. But if there is a gap of 3 months or more, they have to obtain, evidence for one of those months in order to fulfill that 3-month gap. I think especially right now, it's very difficult for folks to get evidence from schools or perhaps, doctor's offices because of the simple fact that many are closed because of COVID-19. However, this is the same reason why we ask them to give us a call to get a consultation in advance. That way they can start calling, those offices and asking for those records in advance because it may take some time to get processed and mailed to them.
Do you expect that there are going to be delays in the processing of the applications once people are able to start submitting them?
Right. So at the moment, there may be a delay for the simple fact that USCIS is expecting to furlough about 70% of their staff. So that may contribute to a delay in the processing of initial DACA applications. When it comes to DACA renewals, USCIS has made the announcement, right, that they will continue to process DACA renewals in a timely manner by reusing old biometrics. So far, I want to say that the average time frame that our office has been probably, seeing has been like between a month, 2 months of processing for an application when it comes to a renewal.
Okay. And then one last question. I know you did mention that your office is providing these services. Is there a fee associated with it? And, since right now, the whole COVID-19, are you all working, doing it over the phone, or how does that work, the consultation?
Yeah, so our offices, better said, are still open to the public, right? The only change is that we're not seeing people in person. So if someone wants to make an appointment, either it be for a consultation, right, or an application, they can give us a call and we can schedule them a telephonic appointment. If for people who are interested in initial DACA, our office has no service fee. So there's no service fee for the consultation and there's no service fee for the actual application itself. So if people want to set up an appointment, they can always call to our office and make that appointment.
Okay, thank you. So for those that are here attending, I did put their number on the chat box. That is the Bakersfield office location. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to call their office. They do have an English and Spanish answering machine, so you do have those options available, and the individuals that work there are bilingual, so you shouldn't feel intimidated or concerned about the language barrier.
Yeah.
So if you all don't have any other questions, you can always contact UFWF for any additional questions, or even our office. We are always directing individuals over to UFWF just because they have so many good resources and they're just the main contact here for us. So thank you so much, Yazmin, for being a part of this. Greatly appreciate it.
No problem. And before we end our conversation today, I do want to inform everyone that we do have this community college program where if you are a community college student, you know, we do have attorneys on board who can also give you a free consultation appointment that can help you free of charge with, you know, your DACA renewal or with any other immigration application. And I can go ahead and drop down the link, you know, in this call for that as well. For those who perhaps, you know, are interested, you can have access to that and easily just contact them through online. They are doing only online appointments. So if you are, you know, interested in doing that, because you are a community college student, you can always click on that link and they will, you know, directly it will directly lead you to make an appointment with them.
Perfect. Yeah. So that's the link in the chat. We'll be posting it on our social media as well. So I would recommend you all following UFWF on social media. Check out their website. We're always cross-posting different opportunities and resources for the people in our community. But if there aren't any questions, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you again, Yazmin.
No problem.
Really appreciate it. All this information is really important. There's so much misinformation going around that, you know, sometimes we just need to clarify and just provide updates. But thank you everyone so much for attending. Again, resources are in the chat, and have a great day. Bye everyone.
Bye everyone. Have a great rest of your day.